Good morning, everyone. You all look so lively. You're so energized already. I don't know how much Java you've had. But I kind of want to dispel one notion right off the bat. In case someone's thinking that I get up really early in the morning and I write and I'm creative, ain't happening. This is really early for me. I'm more of a early afternoon, late afternoon, evening, and then into the morning kind of a creative person. So don't ask me if my creative process includes writing before I have coffee. It ain't happening. But at any rate, thank you very much for being here. I'm pretty lucky that, and thank you, Melissa, for asking me. I'm pretty lucky. I am a 2012 Kresge Fellow, and they made these lovely little, videos of us that's on the Kresge website. I thought we'd play the video and you would it would be a great touch point, and then I would go on from there to what I'm doing with myself now.
My writing style is very visual, highly imagistic. It's based on what I come in contact with in my life and who I come in contact with. I was born in Detroit, but my family comes from Trinidad and Tobago. So both of those influences are evident in my writing. I've been in Detroit all my life. Worked in the Cadillac plant for a good portion of time, and then I went to the General Motors Tech Center. So I was really sort of steeped in the industrial world. In the late 80s, it was really clear the plant was going down. And it was actually a grieving process for me to write about the factory and its people. This is from the last car. On any other day, the cobalt blue Fleetwood body would rest unattended on a trestle at the edge of the second floor, its sides smudged with assembly fingerprints, its windshield taped with assembly instructions called broadcast sheets, already fitted with an instrument panel, seats, a headliner, internal lighting, and wiring harnesses. It would wait for descent to the final assembly line to unite with the engine and chassis, the hood and fenders, headlights, then, ooh la la, it would become a Cadillac Fleetwood Brougham. I'm real far away from being a kind of a social realist in my writing. I'm always looking for the magic of what's in that story.
That's pretty nice, huh? It's like making a silk purse out of a sow's ear. It's amazing. Thank you, Stephen and Corey McGee, for that, and Kresge. I think a couple of things were pretty evident in that little video. One is that I was in the plant, that I write what's in front of me, and that I write out of grief. And I'm looking for some magic along the way. So where I'm at kind of right now, I retired from General Motors after a lot of years, 33.6, in 2006, and somehow or the other managed to find myself at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, the residential college, teaching creative writing. So that's what I've been doing, and all along I got it into my head that I was going to write a novel. What was that all about? I mean, in my previous life, I wrote poetry And then I crossed over into the netherworld and started writing fiction, and pretty much focused on short fiction, and created the book Autopsy of an Engine, Another Stories from the Cadillac Plant. And, but all along, I still had this other stuff going on, just maneuvering around Detroit, and also all of this history from the Trinidad and Tobago people and the other islanders. And after I got out of General Motors and had completed that grieving process, I found myself in another grieving process where I was, older folks started dying out, aunts, my parents. The community that I grew up in had changed, and it didn't exist anymore. And I found myself trying to recall it, and my way of recalling it is almost like I did with the plant. A lot of music, a lot of food, and a lot of really crazy characters. And so that collection of story is going to be called Making Callaloo in Detroit, and it's coming out by Wayne State University Press in the spring. And I don't know, I don't know how you find the magic in something. I can't tell a straight story. There's always something underneath the obvious that I'm trying to look for, that sometimes you just sort of have to open yourself up and let it happen. Throw those characters out on page and let them sort of do their thing. So I thought maybe I would read a little bit of something from one of the stories. This is a story called Over the Belle Isle Boundary. And if anyone, who knows anything about cricket? Whoa. I mean, not those ones that go, not those. Cricket is a game that's a field game, that's prevalent in all of the areas that were, or countries that were part of the British Commonwealth. I remember taking my father to the doctor years and years ago, and it was a Pakistani doctor. And my father, of course, from Trinidad and Tobago. And he goes in there, and this Pakistani doctor and my father start talking like they were long-lost brothers. They were talking about cricket, who's the best team, and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm sitting there totally amazed. And then a few years later, Nancy Jones, who used to be the education director at the Detroit Institute of Arts, gave me a challenge. I think she gave a few people a challenge to write about a favorite place in Detroit. Cricket, Belle Isle. Because in Belle Isle, when I was growing up, there, maybe once a month or so, or every 6 weeks or something, all the community would go there, and there would be a cricket match. There was actually a circuit of cricket players, Detroiters, folks from Windsor, folks from Toledo, and I don't know where else, and you pack a picnic lunch, and which consisted of something like pigeon peas and rice. The Spanish call it gandules, and some chicken and some, you know, whatever kind of food, little nip of rum, you know, that kind of a thing. Some fruit, avocado, and so on. And you'd spend the whole day at Belle Isle, and the adults would watch the cricket match, and then of course I was little and I'd find somebody to play with, and that was, I guess, where the magic was for me. So let me see if I could read this. This old man is in a nursing home, and it was a nursing home on the boulevard, and he's going to, you'll catch a little bit of what he's thinking about in this nursing home. I wonder, can you hear me if I don't use this thing?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. at least just for the reading. I'll try and really project here. By this time, the old man's reverie took him down East Grand Boulevard to Belle Isle. That's where he and his wife spent many summer Sundays observing cricket matches with others from the small West Indian community in Detroit. Mummy would carefully wrap a cast iron pot full of pilau in an old dish towel, lovingly securing the four corners of the towel with a large safety pin. She would nest a couple of avocados in the corner of the picnic basket, along with pepper sauce, sweet cakes, and utensils. Others would bring fruits, rum, and sweet drinks, ice, cookies, chips, and so on. One time, someone brought a manual ice cream maker, and everyone took turns churning. But always his loving wife would bring the pilau, her specialty, long recognized as the best in the Detroit Island community. Ah, those were the days when the cricket teams would come in from all over, Windsor for sure, and as far as Chicago, Toledo, and all had a team back then. All those brown bodies clad in white flannel and white shoes on the green field. They bowled and batted, broke wickets, and often set balls way over the boundary of the cricket field by the casino to shouts of "well played" by "well played." When the cricketers took a break for liquids and food, the fans gathered at the picnic tables, clustered across a small path east of the field. The men dribbled pepper sauce on platefuls of pilau, drank the rum straight with lime, and rehashed the innings just played. When fielders returned to the field and batsmen and bowlers returned to the pitch, the fans retook their positions on the bleachers by the riverside to cheer all of the players on without real team allegiance. After all, they were all now citizens in this island, in this city. So they shouted out appropriately to whichever team. Good running, cool down cool down. It's a bowler's game. Well, maybe luck's allowed. Maybe I'll be able to go to Belle Isle one of these days to see another game. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, you run with the bat. When one guy hit the ball, he's going to run to try and score as many runs as he can. It depends on how hard you hit the ball. If you hit it real hard, go over the boundary, that's a 6. If you don't reach to the end, they run you out. They call it run out. Some of them boys can't make it. They try to make one run, and sometimes they don't. They don't make it. They then want to make 2 runs and so on. And when one guy hit the ball and he don't hit it hard enough, and he hit it in front of one of the fielders, and they have to run with the bat in the hand, and they run, and what the hell, yes buddy, run. And he began groaning, 1 goal, 1 goal, 1 goal. So you'll have to get the book to see what happens with this old man. So another thing that's probably a little bit obvious here is that sometimes I write in dialect, although not all of the collections in this story have to do with the islands. Some are just like, Detroit, other Detroit poets. But all of the stories have their language. So part of trying to make the magic for me has to do with really listening to people, listening how they talk, how they walk, so that that can be captured. So the magic for me is being able to immerse myself in other people and find out their stories and how they're telling them and so on and so forth, and sort of use them to be able to capture what there is out there captured. So the other thing that I've been discovering in the course of trying to write my stories in this novel, which has been going on and on and on, I don't know if I'll ever never get out of this thing. But the other thing that I've been discovering is that, particularly as a writer of fiction, you're actually a bit of a historian. And somebody who's in here who writes poetry is probably going to get angry at me for saying this, but to a degree, I found that poetry, when I was writing poetry, I had more immediate access to the moment. Maybe because in poetry you're doing a little bit of a different thing with language, and you don't have to do all that backstory and prep work and description and all that stuff that you have to do when you're doing fiction. When you're doing fiction, you bring that in. No matter what kind of fiction, there's some kind of verisimilitude that you have to bring to the story, and it takes a while, and it takes you having, in some kind of way, to understand who these people are or were, what were the circumstances, what was the context, what was the weather like, what was that day like, and so on. So I found myself in a fictional way becoming somewhat of a historian. I'm really pleased with this collection. This is the other thing I'm going to tell you about this collection. I'm really pleased with it because and that somebody is going to take it, because it is an opportunity to capture Detroit as I understand it, which is not ruin porn and, oh, look at the buildings and the people are so unhappy and so on. There's a vibrancy and a historical development of the culture of Detroit that is still here. It's still in the air. It's still inspiring people. All my little Trini and Vincentian and Antiguan characters that were motivating around in these streets years and years ago, they've left something here. They left their stories, and fortunately I was there to capture all of that. So I think that's about what I have to say. I don't know, maybe we could just open it up for questions and answers. We know that one of the questions will not be when I write. It won't, because you already know that. It's not really when. But you may have some other questions that you may want to ask of me. I'm calling this period that I'm in right now out of the factory and into the streets, into the city. The factory itself is its own city, but now it's something amazing once you come out of that environment that you're so enmeshed in, and you come out and you see that there's a real world. I think maybe that also helped to trigger me to sort of look around and see what else is out there.
Well, I just want to say that Indian medical students are still playing cricket on Belle Isle.
I know. Yeah, I know. Because when I had to research that story, a lot of the story was actually taken from recordings that I made with my father. Nancy Jones gave me that challenge. I got a little tape recorder, and I went to him and I said, okay, tell me about cricket. And at that time, he was just sort of losing it a little bit, and he was being a little bit repetitive, and he couldn't remember a lot of things. So that's why there's this kind of repetitive and lie, I don't know why, what, run, that kind of a thing going on in his telling of it. But it had been a long time since I had seen a cricket match, so I went out to the old oval, and the Pakistanis had taken it over, and the Islanders had moved down on the other side. But I managed to hook up with some of the team members, and they were really cool. I sat with them and talked to them, and then I read some CLRJs and read some other stuff to try and get a real sense of what the game is now in my opinion.
So, what did you do at GM?
I started out the first 5 years on the motor line, and then I went into, actually I was the first woman in the engineering mechanics trade at Cadillac Engineering, and I went there.
Second part of my question is, were you writing in your head when you were working online?
Yeah, and I was writing, that's when I was writing poetry. I was writing a lot of I was writing some factory poetry and some, some other stuff, just about whatever was there, the people around me, my mother, what have you. And I was writing for real, like I was thinking from home and so on and so forth. Being on the line's a great place to create because you can. It's almost a meditation.
Okay. This is pretty fascinating. I worked my way through college in a factory, and it was an Ivy League college, so I didn't tell anybody in school I was working in a factory. I didn't tell anybody in the factory for sure that I was going down to school. And I'm curious to know whether your coworkers knew you were a creative type, actively engaged, and if so, were they down with it or whatever?
Yeah, actually, they did after a while, particularly when I went into the engineering building. I had actually already graduated from University of Michigan when I started over at the Cadillac plant. And in those days, which was when I was young, I started working when I was 5. Okay? So anyway, back in those days, it was very common for people who were in the left movement, which I was, to go to the factory to organize the workers who were already organized in the unions. But we were all trying to take them to a higher level, right? So when I first went in there, you're right. 2 things you didn't tell them. You didn't tell them that I hated, and you didn't tell them that you had any kind of communist influence. Where that was the kiss of death, especially back then. But eventually, you get acclimated, people get to know you. And when I went, I really started writing a lot. When I went into engineering, getting some books published and so on. When folks would come to the meetings and with Autopsy of an Engine, I was so privileged to be able to read it in a couple of plants and to read it in front of my coworkers, and they all, I nailed it. They said I nailed it, so I felt really good.
In the video, you can see that your home is very creative space and artistic. So how did you marry being at the plant and your home life? I mean, how did that all work?
That's an interesting question, and maybe it's just who I am, that everything translates into color and music and rhythm. Even at the factory, I mean, it wasn't about machines, man against the machine kind of a thing. It was about all of the interactions among the people and how they created communications, a family atmosphere to overcome the machines and the drabness of the work. So I think that's how I saw it, how they became creatively survived within in that environment. So I think that's just how I live my life. That's how it is. Right here.
I'm having a hard time articulating this, but we're always chronicling things in our heads our whole lives, like we're always hearing that story, and there's a lot of doubt about sharing your voice and actually sitting down and taking the time to believe that you're worth writing it down. I'm wondering if you've struggled with similar doubts and how you overcome them.
Oh boy. You hit the nail on the head with that one, yeah. For a long time, I didn't recognize myself as a writer. Even after Autopsy of an Engine came out, and I had poetry published, stories published, and Autopsy actually won a 2005 Penn Beyond Margins Award. That's a big deal. So somebody, was interviewing me, and Elizabeth Nunes, as a matter of fact, on some little radio show or something like that. She had a few of the winners from the Beyond Margin. And I said, well, I really don't even consider myself a writer. And she said, what? How do you not consider yourself a writer? And I think you just have to, at a certain point, just sort of dive in and just do it. And not worry about all that stuff, what people think. And finally, you know, just get over it. I mean, because I think there's an impulse, as your question suggested. There's impulse, and as you're saying, there's impulse to chronicle. There's impulse to do, you know, to play music, to do art, to sing, to dance, whatever it is, and you just have to do it, or else something in you just sickens and dies. And you have to be true to yourself above all. If you're lucky and you can get published, yay, or to get a 2012 university grant, yay! Okay, now I'm a writer. You know, you know, it does sort of change. You do sort of realize that you're in a community and that you're doing something, and that people will get up early and come listen to you talk. And but you just have to keep plugging away at it. I've been plugging away at it for a long time. Since actually before the factory.
Why do you feel, or why do you think you're struggling with fiction when you can write poetry?
Really good question. I needed more space. I needed a different kind of space than poetry provided me. I think essentially all along I've been a storyteller. I think thanks to my mother, she would tell me a lot of stories. She tells me a lot of stories about how things went in the islands. So I think for that reason, I discovered that I wasn't quite satisfied enough with the poetry. Although, you know, there's, like I said, there's that emotion and that thing you can get out in poetry, I think, a little bit more immediately. Not to say poems just happen just like that and you just turn them out. But I just needed, you know, lines, little pages to be able to tell what I have. But I do like short fiction as opposed to the novels. But in this novel, you get lost in this thing. You don't know what you're doing. Man, it's a mess trying to write a novel. But I like the tension of the short story. It's kind of like between poetry and fiction, and it has that kind of tension because by definition you still only have so much space to do what it is you're trying to do in this thing. So. Sir?
If you were to talk about 1967 Detroit, would you call what happened a rebellion or a riot? The second part of that is, do you still consider yourself a lefty? And if so or not, how does that manifest itself today?
That's a really good question. 67, I would classify it as a rebellion. And yes, I do consider myself a lefty. But here's the thing, and this goes back to what you were asking. When you realize that you have a mission, and your mission is to write, you gotta write. And you've got to create that space for you to be able to write. And it's a heck of a time to tell people, okay, you throw a march, I'll show up. But I'm not organizing anything anymore. I've got to organize these characters on this page, and that's what you have to do. So my personal act of rebellion right now is to sit down and write, to capture these characters, to capture my version of history, and to capture whatever message it is I think that my characters are trying to give. And it's an awful time. Sometimes you just have to shut out what's going on out here, because I can't even think of a place that's peaceful on Earth. Maybe this room right now that you guys have calmed down.
Lolita, I have the questions for you. I don't know if I need this. What sort of, so our icebreaker text say what sort of things you need to start your creative process. Are there certain things that you need, like in your vicinity or like mentally or like emotionally, that you need to begin your creative process?
Yeah, I do. I need to clean my desk off. Like in the, you know, when you're in the middle of doing stuff, I just accumulate a lot of papers. And then when I go from one project that I've completed to the next, I just have to clear that. And other than that, I have these little muses that sit on the windowsill by where I am. I can't write with music. And I have to be sober. And my dog and my 2 cats come and help me. I mean, that's pretty much it. And a blank sheet of paper.
Did you cultivate others' writings, you know, before you became a teacher as well at the university?
You mean, did I cultivate others to write?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did actually. I mean, that's part of the shtick. As you get around, there's, you know, workshops. Did some poetry things. A few things with young kids, but I find that I don't really have a talent for working with young kids, even though I raised 2. Thank goodness they were good, because I didn't know what to do with them if they were bad. So anyway, yeah, I did. Prior to going to the university, I did have experience teaching writing.
Did you do that also when you worked at the plant?
Yeah. You'd be surprised. I was a single head of household, and so I did a lot of work. I did the plant, and I did a lot of other things to bring in money, and also to get in with the writing community in Detroit. I don't know if anybody was around, like, say, in the late 80s or so, but it was pretty hopping, especially for the poetry community. I was kind of an outlier when I started writing fiction, but the poets were like rock stars in Detroit. We had a lot of different venues, and a lot of regular series, and Ron Allen comes to mind, Trino Sanchez. We had the Latino Poets Association over there in Southwest Detroit, so there were a lot of different things where you had folks to go, and you'd have a featured reader, and then you'd have some open mic, and there was something going on all the time. I think a lot more than right now.
Clearly you love Detroit. Where do you think we are now, and what would you caution us for as we move forward?
I really don't know. I don't really know where we're at. I don't know if we're in a big mess or if we're on the other side or something. I really don't know. I think we just have to be real and stay connected, and just analyze everything that's going on around us, and do what you do when you're writing, connecting dots, or when you're creating anything, connecting dots in a different kind of way to figure out what is it that's really going on. I mean, do we have a crisis in leadership? Yes, we have a crisis in leadership. Do we, I just don't know where anything is at, you know. I read a horrible statistic the other day that Michigan is one of the leading states for middle-aged suicide. It's just jumping. Michigan. And the other ones are like Wyoming and a couple of places out west, but that's not good. That's not good. And so to the degree that we're able to create, that becomes the salvation for us, you know, our ability to connect with the arts. And of course, that's what they want to take away from us. That's what they want to take away from our children. But I think the ability to connect with the arts, with music, or listen to jazz. When I really feel lost, I go to Burt's in the Marketplace on Thursday. Anybody ever been there? Man, that's just amazing. They have like an open mic with all these jazz musicians and singers, and it's anchored by Bill Meyer and Gail McKinney and Ralph Armstrong. And then you just have the musicians going in there it's just really incredible. It really opens you up. So that's all I can say. That's all I can figure out to do. And then catch a march down here, get some exercise, and get the protest.
Have you been to the islands?
Yeah, I'm going there. I'm going again this year. A family member's son is getting married on Tobago. The beach is a Tobago. Come on. What's not to like about that?
Who do you recommend reading that's your inspiration?
I have a lot of folks I'm reading a lot of Polish boxer. But I think probably my two greatest inspirations are Jorge Borges and Julio Picasso. I just love those guys. Something about them just helped me push through. But there's like a lot of, I'm a big Hemingway fan, Lou Mortimer. I just read The Secret Life of Bees the other day. That was crazy. It was so good. So there's a lot of good stuff that I've been doing.
I just had something to say. When you were just talking about how we need arts to stay alive, to be creative and stay alive, it just reminded me of a quote that Frederick Terrell said, to create to remind yourself you're still alive, and I think anybody.
Yes.
It applies to everything.
Yes, absolutely. Very good.
That's a great comment to end on. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.